The first time I understood that pregnancy would not protect me, I was standing barefoot on a cold kitchen floor before sunrise, one hand braced against the table, the other pressed into the ache in my lower back. Bread dough was rising under a towel by the stove. The room smelled like yeast, wood smoke, and yesterday's coffee. Outside, our horse shifted in the barn. Then I heard my husband's boots on the back step. I remember closing my eyes for 1 second, because by then I had learned that a woman can fear a quiet man more than a loud one. Loud men announce themselves. Quiet men can make you doubt your own pain until it starts to feel like rebellion. My name is Margaret Lapp, and I grew up in an old-order Amish settlement in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. I left when I was 26, and now I tell the stories we were taught to swallow. If you know what it means to live where silence is praised as obedience, subscribe, like this video, and tell me in comments below. People outside usually see the plain dresses, black buggies, prayer coverings, bread cooling by a window, quilts on a line in winter sun. They see simplicity and mistake it for safety. They see quiet and mistake it for peace. But a quiet life is not always a gentle one. I will not lie about the world I came from. Snow around a farmhouse before daylight. Hay warming in the barn. My mother's hands lifting peach jars from a canner in August. Kerosene lamplight making an ordinary kitchen look holy. And still, a place can be beautiful and break you at the same time. We had the ordnung, the church rules everyone could point to. What we could wear. What kind of buggy we could ride. No electricity in the house. No cut hair on women. Men had authority without needing to explain it. Women had duty without being invited to examine it. But those were only the rules you could see. The deeper rules were never written down. Girls learned them early. A good daughter does not make her father repeat himself. A good wife does not embarrass her husband. A good woman does not speak plainly about private pain. If something feels wrong, the first question is not whether it is wrong. The first question is whether you are praying hard enough to bear it. That was the real cage. I married at 21. His name was Eli. He was not a monster. He worked hard. He spoke softly in public. He helped with barn raisings. Older women called him steady, which was almost the same thing as good. That is one of the hardest truths to explain to outsiders. Harm does not always arrive looking frightening. Sometimes it bows its head in church and still believes the woman at home exists partly for his comfort. Before my wedding, the older women spoke in the sideways language women use when plain truth is unsafe. An aunt said, "The first year can feel long." A married cousin told me, "Some nights you let your mind go somewhere else." My mother whispered, "Try not to stiffen against life too early." I did not understand them then. I understand them now, fully. I became pregnant in the first year of our marriage. Everyone was pleased. Pregnancy in an Amish marriage is proof. Proof that the marriage is fruitful. Proof that a young wife is doing what a wife is meant to do. My mother cried with relief. I thought pregnancy might protect me. I thought sickness would be taken seriously. I thought carrying a child would invite tenderness. It did not. In the settlement where I lived, pregnancy did not cancel a husband's expectation. No bishop said that plainly. No mother spelled it out over supper. Systems like ours survive because everybody already knows what not to say. I was 3 months along the first time I tried to refuse in words. I had spent the day sick over the wash basin. That night, while folding Eli's work shirts by lamplight, I said softly, "I don't feel well tonight." He did not shout. He only looked at me and said, "A wife cannot let feelings govern the house." That was all. But the room changed when he said it. I stood there holding one of his shirts, still warm from the iron, and understood that I had touched an invisible wall and found stone. The next morning my mother came by with brown bread wrapped in cloth. She took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. She cut me a slice, spread butter on it, and kept her eyes on the knife. Then she said, "It is easier if you do not brace against everything." That was her comfort. That was also her surrender. By the 5th month, evening had become the hardest part of the day. Morning gave me chores, and chores can numb a person. But after supper, once the dishes were done and the lamp was lit and the fields disappeared into darkness, the whole house changed. The yellow light felt close. My body knew before my mind admitted anything. My shoulders locked by late afternoon. My stomach tightened whenever the light went down. Once I dropped a jar of green beans on the cellar floor and sat on the steps crying over the broken glass, not because of the mess, but because the sound matched something inside me. At church, I learned to sit straight and still. We sat for hours on hard wooden benches, men on one side, women on the other. One Sunday at 6 months pregnant, my lower back pulsed while the sermon turned to obedience, submission, and the beauty of a meek spirit. I stared at the floorboards and felt something in me go cold. We were not being taught peace. We were being taught disappearance. After church, at the fellowship meal, I was carrying coffee when a pain pulled through my lower back so sharply I had to brace myself against the table. Eli's mother saw me and said quietly, "A woman in your condition should be handled gently." Then later she touched my sleeve and whispered, "Still, do not shame him by speaking too much on private marriage matters. Men do not like to be corrected." That was compassion where I came from. Half recognition, half warning. By the 7th month, my feet were swollen by evening. Some nights I could not roll over in bed without biting my cheek to keep from making a sound. One August night, I opened the kitchen door and stood there breathing wet earth and cut hay. I looked into the dark and thought, if I started walking now, how far could I get before daylight? But leaving is not just walking. Leaving means losing your mother's kitchen, your father's voice, your sisters, the graves of your grandparents, the hymns you know by heart, the language your childhood was built in. Sometimes courage is terror that has run out of places to sit. The 8th month was when my body finally refused in a language everyone had to hear. I woke before dawn with a pain so fierce it folded me over the washstand. Eli stood there impatient, asking whether I was making too much of it. Something in me rose then. Not loud. Just final. I said I wanted the midwife. He hesitated. I asked again. The midwife came by buggy just after sunrise. Her name was Sadie Fisher. She had strong red hands and eyes that had watched too many women endure more than they should. She examined me in silence. Then she asked Eli to step outside. That alone felt shocking. When the door closed, she covered my hand with hers and asked, "Margaret, has your body been given enough rest?" I started crying so hard I could barely breathe. She did not ask for details. When Eli came back in, her voice turned formal and cold. "If you want this child born safely," she said, "your wife needs quiet, rest, and no added strain." I watched his face while she spoke. He did not look ashamed. He looked interrupted, offended, as if something he believed belonged to him had been challenged. And there it was. The whole machine in one room. Not love. Not passion. Just entitlement blessed by custom. Access mistaken for intimacy. Obedience mistaken for righteousness. Silence mistaken for peace. That morning was the first time I understood the problem was larger than Eli. We had built holiness out of female disappearance. We had taken a woman's shrinking and renamed it virtue. My daughter was born 3 weeks later, dark-haired and furious, with a cry too strong for such a small body. They laid her on my chest, and I looked at her tiny mouth and thought, I will not teach you silence and call it goodness. But I stayed another 1.5 years. People ask why. Because clarity is not the same as escape. I was exhausted. I was nursing. I had no money of my own, no driver's license, no map for the outside world. The bishop visited our kitchen and asked if I was keeping a grateful spirit. He reminded me that men carry heavy burdens. That is another truth outsiders should know. Control rarely sounds violent when it wears religious language. It sounds concerned. It sounds orderly. It sounds like a man trying to preserve the family. I left when Miriam was 19 months old. Not after one dramatic scene. I left after 1,000 tiny erasures. I left after hearing my daughter cry from the next room and feeling dread flood my body because I knew what kind of woman she would be taught to become. And I left because an English nurse at a clinic asked me a question nobody in my life had ever asked in plain language. She said, "Do you feel safe at home?" I did not know how to answer, because no one had ever offered me that word before. Safe. Not obedient. Not married. Not provided for. Safe. Years later, in therapy, I learned other words. Coercion. Boundaries. Consent. Trauma. The first time a therapist said, "Your body was telling the truth even when your mouth could not," I cried so hard I had to stop speaking. I do not tell this story because every Amish husband is the same. They are not. I do not tell it because every mother knew how to save us and chose not to. Most people inside strict systems are also shaped by them and rewarded for protecting them. But kindness inside a system does not cancel the system. If you are listening and something in this story is landing too close to your own life, hear me carefully. If your no has been treated like rebellion, that does not mean your no is wrong. If your pain has been called duty, that does not make it holy. If the people around you only know how to love the version of you that never refuses, that is not peace. That is control dressed in familiar clothes. Sometimes I still dream about that farmhouse kitchen before dawn. The bowl of rising dough. The wood smoke in the air. The horse shifting in the barn. The sound of Eli's boots on the step. The young woman standing there with one hand on her aching back, trying to decide whether her suffering counted. When I wake from that dream now, I wake in a different life. My daughter is down the hall with a voice that does not ask permission to exist. The rule that almost destroyed me was never written down. That made it no less real. And if nobody has told you this in plain language yet, let me be the one. The silence was never holy. It was just silence.